You probably won't believe this, but I used to work check-in for a major cruise line. Caribbean routes, mostly families, on vacation, retirees, honeymooners, you name it. My job wasn't glamorous. I sat behind a counter, scanned passports, checked names against the manifest, and waved people onto the gangway. Easy money, mindless repetition. But there was one name, one passenger. I can't forget her. Her ticket would always print out in pale, most faded ink, like the system was struggling to process it. Her name was Marianne Holt, mid-40s, blonde in the photo, eyes gray-blue. Always cabin 314. Always the same seat assignment for dining. The picture wasn't especially memorable, but her file kept showing up every trip. The first time, I thought nothing of it. Hundreds of people bored. Maybe she slipped past me in the crowd. But by the third voyage, I started noticing the pattern. Marianne Holt was always on the manifest, but I never once saw her step through security. No luggage tag, no family. Just her name on the screen, highlighted green, cleared for boarding. I tried asking around. Other attendants just shrugged. Some people board early, one said. But I knew that wasn't true. We don't let anyone through without a pass from us first. I let it slide until the complaints started. On the second night of one trip, a woman came down to the desk, pale as death. "There's someone in my cabin," she whispered. She was just standing at the foot of the bed. Her cabin, 314. I checked the record. It was supposed to be occupied by Marianne Holt, but Holt never collected her key card. The slot was still filled with an unclaimed envelope, the magnetic strip pristine. "Maybe you're mistaken," I told her. My voice didn't sound like mine. I didn't believe it myself. But the woman refused to go back. She switched cabins, insisted she wouldn't stay another night. After she left, I unlocked 314 with my master key and stepped inside. It smelled wrong. Damp, like seawater that had been sitting too long. The sheets on the bed were turned down, though no one had touched them. And the mirror on the vanity guide, I swear it was fogged over. Like someone had been standing there, breathing heavily. I told myself the cleaners must have left the AC low. That's what I clung to. But then I noticed something scratched into the wood at the edge of the desk. Not deep, not like with a knife. Just shallow lines, like fingernails dragged against the surface. Again and again. 4 lines, close together. Then another set, slightly below. Claw marks. The next morning, Holt's name was still on the active passenger list. But she wasn't at muster drill. She wasn't at dinner. Nobody saw her. And still, guests kept calling the desk, complaining about footsteps in the hallway outside 314 at night. I told my supervisor. She gave me this look like I was wasting her time. "Just check her off manually," she said. "If she doesn't show up, she doesn't show up." But that's not how it works. Our system doesn't let us skip names. They either board or they don't. Marianne Holt always came up as boarded, I swear. The last night of that trip, I heard her too. I was closing down the kiosk when the printer by my elbow sputtered and spat out a slip of paper without a request. Just her name again, Marianne Holt. Cabin 314. But below that, in faint type I've never seen the machine produce before, were 3 words. "She is here." And as I turned, I swear I saw movement on the gangway, like someone had just stepped aboard, even though we'd been at sea for days. The ship sailed into open water, a bataille, knees. Somehow, I just checked in a passenger who never walked through my line. I couldn't get her name out of my head. Marianne Holt. The printer slip with "She is here" burned a hole in my pocket. I carried it around for days, rubbing the cheap thermal paper until the words blurred, as if I could erase them by force. By the next voyage, I was already jumpy. Every time the manifest loaded, I prayed her name wouldn't appear. But it did. Same pale, washed-out text. Same cabin, 314. I tried something desperate. I flagged her file in the system as a no-show. The cursor blinked, then froze. The program locked up for a full minute before spitting back in error. passenger already boarded, but she hadn't. No one had. That night, one of the other attendants, Marco, went pale as a sheet. He swore he saw someone walk through the checkpoint without scanning right past him, just slipping between two passengers. He tried to grab her wrist, but said it felt like mist, like his hand passed through. Nothing. He asked me what cabin she was listed under. When I told him 314, his mouth pressed into a thin line. He didn't say another word. The complaint started earlier this time. A newlywed couple came storming down, insisting that someone had been trying to open their door in the middle of the night. Not knocking, testing the handle. Their cabin, directly across from 314. I volunteered to check it out. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to catch someone in the act and laugh it off. The hallway was empty when I got there. Too empty. Cruise ships always hum machinery, AC, distant music. But in that corridor, it was like standing inside a vacuum. The carpet muffled my steps. Even my breathing felt wrong, swallowed by the silence. I stood outside, 314 keycard in hand, waiting for, I don't know, movement, sound, anything. When I slid the card and pushed the door open, I swear I heard something scuttle away, quick and wet, like a crab across tile. But the room looked pristine. Bed made, lights off. Only the faint smell of brine hung in the air. Then I noticed the mirror. The fog again. But this time, letters had formed in it, like someone had pressed their lips close to the glass and whispered until their breath left a mark. Let me out. I stumbled back so fast, I nearly tripped. The door slammed shut behind me, not with my hand, not with the draft, but like someone pushed it hard. I swiped my key frantically, but the lock refused to blink green. I was trapped. The air grew colder, sharp enough that I could see my breath fogging in front of me. A faint dripping sound came from the bathroom. I told myself it was just the faucet, but when I finally forced the door open, the sink was bone dry. Instead, water trickled down the mirror against seawater, thick and reeking of salt. And in the reflection, over my shoulder, stood a woman. I spun, heart in my throat, but no one was there. The reflection lingered anyway. A pale face, hair plastered damp against her cheeks, lips moving silently. I swear, her eyes locked on mine. That's when Marco pounded on the door from the hallway. The key finally worked. I bolted out, gasping, nearly collapsing against him. Don't go back in there, he whispered, eyes wide. That cabin isn't meant for the living. I wanted to argue, but the smell of brine still clung to my clothes, and when I looked down at my hands, they were damp with salt water. And yet, despite everything, the manifest for our next voyage showed her name again, Mary Ann Holt. Cabin 314, like she'd never left. I thought I could ignore it. Just do my job, scan the tickets, okay, and stop looking at cabin 314. But the thing about cruise ships is, you can't escape people, or whatever she was. The next voyage started like clockwork. Families with strollers, retirees in Hawaiian shirts, college kids, already half drunk. I tried to bury myself in a routine. Passport, manifest, smile, wave them through. But halfway through the boarding rush, I saw it again. Her file loaded across my screen. Mary Ann Holt, cabin 314. My stomach turned to ice. I glanced up at the gangway, scanning faces. No one matched the photo. No one looked like her. Still, her name blinked green. Boarded. Marco noticed me freeze. He leaned over and whispered, "She's back, isn't she?" I nodded, too afraid to say her name aloud. That night, a security alert came over the radio. Unexplained wet footprints leading from the pool deck down to passenger cabins. The trail ended outside 314. They sent me and Marco to check it. The hall was deserted, except for the sound. God, that sound, wet, deliberate steps on carpet just ahead of us. When we turned the corner, the footprints appeared fresh, glistening under the dim light. The door to 314 stood ajar. Don't, Marco Marco hissed. He clutched my arm so tightly his nails dug into my skin. "If you open it again, she'll notice you." But the door creaked wider on its own, like an invitation. The smell of seawater hit us. Stronger this time. Decay mixed with salt. Inside, the room looked like it had aged decades in a week. Sheets damp and yellowed. Walls swollen with moisture. And there, sitting at the vanity, was her. Not just a reflection. Not just a blur. A woman. Back hunched, hair hanging in dripping clumps, her skin pale like wax. She slowly turned toward me, lips peeling back into a grin that was too wide to knowing. Her voice was wrong, hollow, echoing, like it came from the walls themselves. "You let me aboard." I stumbled back, heart hammering. Marco pulled me away, slamming the door. We sprinted down the hall. The sound followed the heavy drag of wet feet behind us. We didn't stop until we reached the crew's stairwell. Marco shoved me inside, slamming the metal door shut. "She's tied to the manifest," he panted. "As long as her name's there, she's on this ship." I wanted to deny it, but deep down, I knew he was right. For the rest of the trip, we avoided that corridor. But complaints still poured in. Voices outside cabin doors. A pale figure standing on balconies that no one had access to. And every morning, the system showed her as present, checked in. As real as any other passenger. When we docked back on shore, I thought maybe it would end. Passengers disembarked. Luggage rolled away. The ship emptied. I told myself she'd be gone too. But as the last family left, I glanced at the terminal screen one final time. Only one name remained unchecked. The system, still waiting. Marianne Holt. Cabin 314. My hands shook as I reached to clear it manually. But before I could press the key, the printer sputtered again. The slip slid out, curling onto the desk. Same words as before, but bolder, darker. "She is still here." And when I looked up, across the empty gangway, I saw a pale figure standing alone on the deck, watching me, waiting for me to board. I quit that job the next morning, but no matter where I go, every cruise line manifest I've seen since then always has her name. I don't usually tell this story. You'll probably think I made it up. But I worked as a mechanic on a mid-sized cruise ship in the early 2000s. And there are some things I saw in the bowels of that vessel that no engineer's manual could explain. Ships are alive, in a way. They groan, breathe, and settle like giant beasts. I spent most of my nights elbow deep in grease, replacing pipes, tightening valves, listening for vibrations in the engines that shouldn't be there. We knew every sound, every flicker, every corridor, which is why the lights below deck still haunt me. It was 2:30, the morning when I first noticed them. I was doing my rounds in the engine spaces, the kind of endless routine where you half sleepwalk with a flashlight. The hum of the turbines kept me steady, like a lullaby of machinery. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A faint glow seeping from a doorway at the far end of the corridor. Yellow, warm, but wrong like candlelight. That didn't make sense. That area wasn't supposed to exist. According to the schematics, the corridor ended in a bulkhead. Just steel wall. No door. But there it was. I rubbed my eyes, took a step closer. The glow flickered, bending shadows across the floor, as if something were moving behind the light. I tightened my grip on the wrench in my hand and muttered, "Some idiot must have left a lamp down here." When I reached the end of the hall, I stopped cold. The door was real. Heavy, rust-flecked metal with a round handle. The glow seeped from the cracks around its edges. And I swear I could hear faint voices beyond it. I pressed my ear against the cold steel. Nothing distinct, just a low, humming murmur, like dozens of people whispering at once. I backed away, muttering curses, and decided I was too tired. Maybe it was a reflection, a trick of my flashlight. I told myself I'd check again in the morning. Except the next night, it was still there. And the light was brighter, This time, I forced myself to touch the handle. It was warm, like someone had been holding it from the other side. I yanked my hand back, heart racing. Nothing in the lower decks should generate that kind of heat. I reported it to my supervisor. He laughed it off. Been hitting the coffee too hard. You're seeing things, man. That section is sealed. Always has been, but I couldn't shake it. The third night, I went back. This time, I brought Markoya, the same guy from the last story. We'd worked different lines together over the years. I wanted a witness. We found the corridor, the glow, the door, but when I asked him what he saw, he frowned. It's just a bulkhead, he said. Nothing there. I stared at him like he'd lost his mind. I could see the door. The glow was so bright, it painted my hands gold. I stepped closer, and his face twisted in confusion. Where the hell are you going? You're about to walk into the wall. That's when I realized whatever was down here, it only wanted me. I pressed my palm flat against the handle again. This time, it turned with a slow, deliberate creak. A wave of hot, damp air rolled out, thick with the stink of brine and rot. And beneath it all, the whispering rose into something clearer words in a language I didn't know, but that still scraped against my bones like recognition. I should have slammed it shut. I should have run, but instead, I leaned forward, and the darkness beyond leaned back. And when I blinked, I swear the glowing doorway wasn't behind the wall anymore. It was inside my head. I barely slept after that night. My head swam with whispers I couldn't understand, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that glow burning behind my eyelids. By the time my next shift rolled around, I was a wreck. Still, I had to know if the door was really the roar, if I'd cracked under the strain of too many long nights. I crept back to the corridor around 1 a.m. The hum of the turbines echoed around me, steady as a heartbeat. For a few moments, the hall looked empty. Just steel bulkheads and pipes, same as always. Then the glow bloomed again, stronger this time. Like someone had switched on a lantern deep behind the metal. I muttered under my breath, "You're not real." But the glow pulsed, as if answering. I grabbed my radio, calling Marco. "You've got to come see this again. I'm not crazy." He showed up 20 minutes later, hair still mussed from sleep. He stood at the end of the corridor, rubbing his eyes. "You're wasting my..." He stopped, tilted his head. "Okay? I hear it this time." My blood turned to ice. The whispers. He nodded slowly. His face was pale. "Yeah, like..." Chanting. We moved closer together, the sound growing clearer, layered voices, low and rhythmic, chanting in a tongue that scraped wrong against my ears. The heat radiated from the door, and now Marco could feel it too. "Jesus," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "What the hell is behind there?" I didn't answer. My hand was already reaching for the handle again. This time, when it creaked open, Marco swore under his breath and stepped back. The corridor beyond was impossible. It stretched downward, a steep set of rusted stairs leading into a cavernous black space. And at the very bottom, faint lights flickered like lanterns swaying in water. The chanting grew louder. I whispered, "We should call the captain." Marco shook his head violently and say, "What?" "That there's a door into nowhere below deck. They'll can us both." He was right, but leaving it pretending it wasn't there felt worse. Like if I turned my back, it would follow me. So we decided to mark it. I scratched an X into the bulkhead with my wrench, deep enough to gouge the paint. If it's gone tomorrow, we'll know. We left in silence. The next morning, I rushed back before my shift. The glow was gone. The door was gone. Just a solid steel wall. But the X I carved was still there. I tried to tell myself it was fine, that whatever it was, it had passed. But when I reported to the engine room that night, the lights flickered. Just once, a quick pulse, and for a split second, I saw water dripping from the ceiling, black, oily. Hallucinations. I whispered to myself. You're overworked. That's all. Then Marco came sprinting in, eyes wide. It's back, he gasped. And this time it's open. We ran down to the corridor. Sure enough, the glow flooded the space, brighter than ever, bleeding across the steel like liquid sunlight. The door gaped wide, spilling heat and whispers into faint spray of saltwater mist. And at the bottom of those impossible stairs, I swear I saw figures. Dozens of them, pale shapes swaying like they were underwater, heads tilted back, mouths still moving with the chant. Close it, Marco shouted, shoving at the door. But the handle burned his palms raw, and the door refused to budge. That's when the chanting stopped all at once. Silence dropped like a hammer. Every figure below turned their heads upward toward us, and in the flicker of those lights, saw their faces weren't whole. The pale shapes began climbing the stairs, and I realized they weren't walking, they were floating upward through the air. They rose without touching the stairs. Pale shapes gliding upward through the glowing dark, arms hanging limp, faces slack. Their eyes were gone, just hollow sockets where seawater spilled down their cheeks like tears. Marco froze beside me. Jesus Christ, run, I hissed, yanking his sleeve. But the door slammed shut behind us before we could retreat. The clang echoed through my chest. We were trapped. The air grew heavy, damp, suffocating. The chanting started again, louder, more jagged, no longer a murmur, but a roar that rattled the steel walls. I could feel it vibrating in my bones. The figures kept floating closer, mouths gaping open like fish breaking the surface. Their teeth were long, jagged, sharp as coral. I swung my wrench at the nearest one, expecting it to pass through. But the metal connected solidly, crunching through bone that shouldn't have been there. The thing shrieked, a piercing wail that made my ears bleed, collapsed into a puddle of seawater that hissed against the floor. Marco stared at me in shock. You can hurt them. That was all I needed to hear. Rage and terror boiled together. For once, I wasn't just prey. We fought. Every time one came close, I swung the wrench, smashing skulls, cracking bones that dissolved into brine. Marco grabbed a length of pipe and joined in. The chanting turned to shrieks, then to silence, until only a handful of figures remained. But they kept coming, endless, climbing out of the black. We can't kill them all, Marco gasped, sweat pouring down his face. He was right. My arms burned, lungs seared, but the glow was only intensifying. More figures swayed in the depths, waiting their turn. That's when I noticed the door. The hinges, the frame it pulsed faintly, like a living heart. The glow didn't come from the figures. It came from the threshold itself. I screamed over the roar. The door. We have to kill the door. Marco looked at me like I was insane, but he followed as I rushed forward. Together, we swung at the frame, denting the steel, cracking the seams. The glow flared, the air turned scalding, and the figures wailed, retreating slightly, as if wounded. One final swing. My wrench broke in half, but the frame split with a deafening crack. The glow died instantly. The figures evaporated into steam. The chanting cut off mid-breath. We collapsed in the sudden silence, gasping. The door was gone. Nothing but bulkhead. Marco was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. Did we stop it? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My arms were numb, my ears ringing. But for the first time, the corridor was dark, cold, silent. Just still, we stumbled out together, leaving puddles of seawater trailing our boots. I never told the captain, never told anyone. A week later, Marco quit. Said he'd never work another ship again. Me, I stayed. Someone had to. Because I know one thing, that door will come back. Maybe on this ship, maybe on another. But if it does, I'll be ready. This time, I won't just close it. It's pry. I'll destroy whatever's waiting on the other side. We didn't escape untouched. But for one night, below deck, I know we won. I worked as a cabin steward on a cruise ship for 6 years. My job was simple: clean, restock, and make sure every guest felt like royalty. One could fold a towel into a swan blindfolded, replace minibar items in under a minute, and strip a bed with military precision. You get used to the rhythms of it, the constant chatter of guests, the muffled footsteps in hallways, the clink of glasses from the dining room. But every ship has one cabin nobody wants to talk about. Ours was 6B. Officially, 6B was supposed to be vacant. It wasn't listed in the passenger logs, never assigned in the booking system. The door stayed locked, and I was told to ignore it. Maintenance storage, they said. Just skip it. But I cleaned the cabins around it. I knew the sounds of people settling in, the shuffle of suitcases, the TV muffled through walls. And 6B didn't stay quiet. The first time I heard breathing. Long, heavy exhales, like someone sleeping too close to the wall. I froze in the middle of remaking the bed in 6A, listening. My guest hadn't checked in yet, so the cabin was empty. But the breathing was too clear, too close, right through the thin bulkhead from 6B. I knocked on the wall once, hard. The breathing stopped instantly. The silence felt worse. Later that evening, a couple in 6C complained. "Someone keeps slamming their bathroom door next to us," the man grumbled. I checked. 6B's door was sealed, no lights on. Still, the sound had carried through the walls. Sharp and deliberate, by the end of that week, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I waited until my shift ended, then borrowed a master key from the supply closet. My hand shook as I slid it into 6B's lock. The door opened with a reluctant click, as if resisting me. The smell hit me first: stale salt water, damp fabric, and something sour underneath, like spoiled milk. My flashlight cut across the room, and my stomach dropped. The cabin wasn't empty. The bed was made, sheets perfectly tucked, a single suitcase set upright in the corner, and on the vanity, a mirror fogged as if someone had just exhaled against it. I stumbled back into the hallway, slamming the door. My heart hammered. The suitcase looked old, out of style, like something from the 1960s, and I knew damn well no guest had been checked in there the next day. I confronted my supervisor. He gave me a flat look and said, "Stay out of 6B. Some rooms aren't for you to worry about." "But there's luggage in there," I argued. "Someone's using it." He leaned close, voice low. "We don't speak of it. Do your job, and you'll keep it." That night, I lay awake in my crew quarters, listening to faint knocks echoing through the pipes. Soft at first, then louder. 3 knocks. Always 3. The following morning, one of my assigned guests stormed up to me. "You need to move us," she demanded. Her eyes were bloodshot, her voice raw with exhaustion. We kept hearing someone breathing in our room, right by the closet, like they were standing inside it. Her cabin number, 6B's neighbor. I moved her immediately. When I checked the empty room after she left, the closet door was ajar. Inside, I swear, the dark smelled like the sea. And carved into the inside of that closet door, deep and jagged, were 3 words: "I am here." I should have reported it again, but after my supervisor's warning, I kept my mouth shut. Still, couldn't stop thinking about those 3 words scratched inside the closet. "I am here," I told myself. Maybe it was old graffiti, some crew member's bad joke. But every time I passed 6B, I felt the weight of eyes pressing through the door. By the 4th day of the voyage, complaints poured in from cabins nearby. Guests said they heard someone pacing. A man swore he woke up to see a shadowy figure standing in the hall outside, dripping water onto the carpet. Housekeeping checked. No spills, nothing. That night, I lingered after my shift, waiting until the corridor cleared. I slid my master key into 6B again. The suitcase was gone. The bed, untouched. But the mirror was still fogged fresh, damp, like someone had breathed across it moments earlier. And in that fog, New words had appeared. Why did you open it? I staggered back, throat dry. My flashlight flickered, sputtered out, then returned. In that brief moment of darkness, I swore I heard breathing right behind me, steady and ragged. I spun, but the room was empty. I shut the door and nearly ran into Marco in the hallway. He'd taken a transfer to our ship a few months back. He saw my face and raised an eyebrow. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he muttered. 6B, I whispered. "It's occupied." Marco paled instantly. "Not this again." "You know something?" I pressed. He hesitated, then leaned in. "That room. It's been sealed off for years. They say a passenger drowned in there. During a storm, water rushed in somehow. No one could explain it. They drained the room, patched it up, but..." He trailed off. "But what?" He swallowed hard. "Every voyage since then, guests complain about breathing. Knocks, wet footprints. They finally stopped booking it." I wanted to argue, but the story fit too well. The next morning, I checked the cabin logs. Sure enough, 6B hadn't been assigned in nearly a decade. Still, the electronic record showed the room as occupied, not by a name, just a blank entry. That night, the knocks came again. Louder. This time, they echoed through my own cabin walls. Always 3. I pressed my ear against the thin metal, heart pounding. On the third set, I whispered, "What do you want?" The answer came, muffled but clear. A long, drawn-out inhale, rattling and wet, like lungs full of seawater. The next morning, I almost quit. I packed my things, ready to walk off at the next port. But before I left, a guest from 6C cornered me in the hallway. Tears streamed down her face. "There was a man in our bathroom last night," she said. "He was crouched in the tub, just staring. He didn't move. When we screamed, he disappeared." Her cabin shared a bathroom wall with 6B. That broke me. I stormed down to 6B, master key in hand. My pulse hammered as I jammed it into the lock. The door swung open, slamming against the wall. The cabin was flooded ankle-deep in dark, cush water, and standing in the middle, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, was a man in a soaked suit. His lips were blue, his skin bloated, and his chest rose and fell with heavy, ragged breaths. He looked up at me. Water spilled from his mouth when he spoke. "You opened it again," and as he stepped toward me, the cabin door slammed shut on its own, locking us both inside. The door slammed behind me with a deafening clang, plunging the cabin into stale, briny darkness. My master key rattled uselessly in the lock. I was trapped inside with him, the drowned man in the soaked suit. He didn't move at first, just stood ankle-deep in the murky water, head tilted, chest heaving with those awful wet breaths. Each exhale bubbled through his lips, spilling salt water down his chin. "Stay back," I whispered, though my voice was shaking too hard to sound threatening. My flashlight flickered, throwing jagged shadows across his bloated face. His eyes were milk white, drifting lazily in their sockets like they were floating loose. He took one slow step forward. The water rippled around his ankles, then another. Each step was punctuated by the sound of water gurgling from his lungs. Panic surged. I swung my flashlight at him. It cracked against his shoulder, but instead of stumbling back, he leaned into it, his lips curling into something that almost resembled a smile. The light fizzled out, plunging the cabin into blackness. I scrambled backward, splashing, my hand hitting the closet door. I yanked it open, praying it would lead to escape. But all I found inside was pitch-dark water, sloshing against the frame, endless and deep, as if the closet led straight into the ocean. The smell of rot and salt nearly choked me. Behind me, his voice rasped. "You opened it?" I turned, pressing my back against the closet, but he was closer now, arms outstretched, water streaming from his fingertips. His skin hung loose, peeling in strips. Desperate, I shoved the closet door shut again. My breath came in ragged gasps. My only thought was escape. I lunged for the main cabin door, ramming my shoulder against it, but it didn't budge. The handle was ice cold, frozen solid. Something touched my ankle, slimy, heavy. His hand, I kicked free. But the water was rising now, swirling around my shins, then my knees. It seeped from the floorboards, pouring in faster than it should have been possible. My heart pounded as I realized the cabin was becoming the same tomb it must have been years ago. He stood in the center, watching me struggle, his head lolling unnaturally. And then, in one grotesque movement, he opened his mouth wider than any jaw should go. Seawater gushed from him, flooding the room. The icy water hit my chest. My lungs burned with panic. I screamed for help, pounding on the walls, but no one came. The drowned man's voice echoed through the rising flood. "Breathe with me." The water surged over my head. Salt burned my eyes, filled my throat. I thrashed, but my limbs were heavy, sluggish. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was his pale, swollen face right in front of mine, smiling. When I woke, I was outside, lying in the hallway, coughing up seawater, surrounded by crew members who swore they'd found me unconscious against the wall. The door to 6B was sealed tight again. My supervisor's face was grim. He pulled me aside and said, "You should have listened. Some cabins don't stay empty. Some passengers don't leave." I don't know how I survived. Maybe he let me. Maybe he wanted me to carry the story. But I never worked another cruise after that. Sometimes, though, when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear it again. 3 knocks against the wall. Always 3. Always from the other side. I escaped the ship, but part of me drowned in cabin 6B, and I don't think it ever let me go. Vacations aren't supposed to haunt you. I only went on that cruise to relax, to forget work for a week, to drink overpriced cocktails and float around like everyone else. But what I saw on that ship didn't belong in any brochure. It started with the pool. Every cruise liner has one of the crown jewel on the top deck, with rows of lounge chairs and blaring music. On the first night, I wandered up there late, sometime after midnight. Most passengers were asleep, the bar closed, the deck quiet, but the pool was still lit. The turquoise water shimmered under the floodlights, rippling with the lazy churn of the ship's motion. I leaned against the railing, enjoying the silence. That's when I noticed something odd. The water wasn't just rippling. It was rising. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the waves sloshing higher against the tiles. But then the surface bulged upward, swelling like something beneath it was pushing. A pocket of water surged, lifted, then collapsed back into itself with a sound like a heavy exhale. I backed away, heart racing, telling myself it was just pressure. Maybe a pump malfunction. But the pool drains were dry, and the deck was bone dry too. The next morning, I went back. Tourists crowded around, kids splashing, bartenders serving drinks. The pool looked normal. I almost laughed it off. Maybe I'd had too much rum the night before, but when I returned again at midnight, the water was gone. Not drained, not covered, just gone. The tiles lay bare, dry and cracked, as though the pool had been empty for years. No puddles, no trace of water. I leaned over the edge, staring into the basin. My reflection wavered in the faint light. Then I realized it wasn't my reflection at all. Someone else was staring back up at me, a pale face, eyes open to wide, mouth slack as though they were screaming underwater. The features blurred when I blinked, replaced by my own, but my stomach twisted. I hurried back to my cabin, convincing myself it was exhaustion. But the next day, curiosity clawed at me again. By day, the pool was full and pristine, laughter and music echoing across it. By night, it was dry, silent, dead. I tried telling another passenger, middle-aged guy I chatted with at dinner. He laughed. "You've been hitting the cocktails too hard, my friend." Pool's always there, but the way he avoided my eyes made me wonder if he'd seen something too. On the third night, I brought my phone to record it. Midnight came, and sure enough, the water vanished. Tiles bare. My phone's camera shook as I zoomed in. The lens flickered, static crawling across the screen. When I replayed the footage, the pool wasn't empty. It was full of water, and something moving just beneath the surface, too many shapes to count. I dropped the phone. My breath came in sharp bursts, fogging the cool night air. When I dared to look again, the pool was empty, but wet footprints now trailed from the edge across the deck, as though something had climbed out, and they were fresh. The prints lead toward the cabin's end. I knew with a sick certainty that whatever came out of that pool was walking among us. I couldn't leave it alone. The pool wasn't just an oddity anymore. It was wrong. It's like a wound on the ship that kept opening at night. The next day, I tried to ask a crew member about it, a bartender on the pool deck. "Hey," I said casually, "has the pool ever drained unexpectedly at night?" Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then she shook her head. "Maintenance schedules are in the morning. The pool's always full. Always." She walked away before I could press further. That night, I returned, heart hammering, camera in hand. Midnight. Same story. The water was gone, the basin cracked and dry. But this time, there was something else, movement. At the bottom of the empty pool, figures writhed. Pale, emaciated shapes crawling across the tiles, dragging themselves with jerky, unnatural motions. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. They weren't supposed to be visible. Not like this. But the longer I stared, the clearer they became. Dozens of them, their limbs bent wrong, fingers stretched too long, mouths gaping open in silent screams. One of them stopped crawling. Its head jerked upward, and even from the railing, I swear it locked eyes with me. I staggered back, my phone clattering to the deck. By the time I picked it up again, the pool was empty. No figures, just dust and silence. The following day, I avoided the deck, but when I finally passed by in the afternoon, the water shimmered under the sun as though nothing had happened. Kids splashed and laughed, and yet, when I leaned close to the surface, I could swear the laughter distorted like it was echoing from beneath the water instead of above it. That night, I forced myself to return again. Empty. Always empty. Except this time, the footprints weren't just on the deck. They led down the stairs, into the passenger corridors. I followed them, heart racing. The trail stopped at a cabin door. 8F, my cabin. The handle was wet. My keycard trembled in my hand. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, holding my breath. Everything looked normal. Bed made, lights off. Except for one thing. The air was damp, heavy, thick with the scent of chlorine and salt. And my bathroom sink was running. When I turned the handle, the water didn't stop. It kept pouring, gurgling, spilling over the porcelain. I tried to shut off the main valve, but the pipes groaned and hissed. The water wasn't clear, it was cloudy, almost gray, with strands of something dark swirling inside. And then I heard it, breathing, from the shower. I yanked the curtain aside. Empty, but the floor of the tub was wet, impossibly wet, salt water pooling as if it had seeped through the drain, not down it. I backed out, chest heaving, slamming the bathroom door shut. My reflection in the mirror caught me and froze my blood. There was someone standing behind me. I spun, swinging my phone like a weapon. No one was there, but in the mirror, the pale face stared over my shoulder. Lips parted, eyes wide. I dropped the phone. The screen cracked against the tile. When I looked back, the mirror was fogged over, letters forming slowly in the condensation. "You're already inside." And when I rushed back to the pool deck, it wasn't empty anymore. It was full, churning violently, though no one else on the ship seemed to notice. The pool was full again, but not with water I recognized. The The surface churned, frothing as though a storm raged beneath it. No wind touched the deck, no storm clouds overhead, just that furious boil of liquid thrashing against the tiled walls. It didn't even look like water anymore. Too dark, too thick. I glanced around wildly. Other passengers lounged nearby, oblivious. A woman sipped a cocktail. Children splashed happily. None of them reacted to the violent surge right in front of me. I staggered to the edge, heart hammering. The pool roared, echoing in my skull. But when I looked up at the nearest couple sunbathing, didn't even flinch. I whispered, "You don't see this?" No answer, just blank stares. I pulled out my cracked phone, recording again. On the screen, the pool appeared calm. Clear blue water, kids laughing. But to my eyes, it writhed with shapes. Pale bodies twisting just below the surface, reaching upward. Hands pressing against the underside like glass. One hand broke through. I reeled back as a bloated, gray limb clawed at the tiles, dripping thick black water. Another followed. Then a face surfaced eyes, bulging, lips blue, jaw unhinged too wide. It gasped silently, then fixed its gaze on me. I screamed for help. No one turned. The family nearest me kept laughing, splashing in the illusion of calm water. The figure heaved itself higher, its torso breaching, chest heaving as though drowning in reverse. More hands surfaced around it, clawing, pulling, desperate. I backed away, feet slipping on the slick tiles. My phone slipped from my grip and skidded across the deck. The thing reached out, fingers inches from my ankle, and then the pool was empty. Tiles, bare, cracked, dry, dot. The sudden silence roared louder than the water. My lungs burned. Passengers around me glanced up in confusion, as if I'd just screamed at nothing. I stumbled forward, snatched up my phone, and backed away. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that cold water pulling at me on the last day of the voyage. I decided I had to see it one final time. To prove I wasn't insane, I crept up to the deck just before dawn. The pool was still empty, drained of even the illusion. The tiles gleamed wet, though no water touched them, and in the pale morning light, I finally saw it. Words carved deep into the basin. Letters gouged across the floor like hundreds of hands had scratched them out together. "You were never a passenger." My stomach dropped. I pulled up my booking app on my phone, hands trembling. My cabin number wasn't listed. My name wasn't in the manifest. According to the ship's records, I'd never boarded. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't supposed to be there. The pool was never disappearing. It was taking me back, piece by piece. And when I looked down at my reflection in the cracked tiles, it wasn't me anymore. It was the pale face I'd seen that first night, staring up, mouth open wide, in a silent scream. I disembarked with the others, but the ship's log swears I was never on board, like I'd already drowned, and the pool was just reminding me. I worked entertainment on a cruise ship for almost 3 years. That meant juggling, duties, karaoke nights, trivia, costume contests, even running the midnight comedy show when the scheduled comic got too drunk to stand. We practically lived on the intercom. That's why I know something wasn't right. Our PA system was tightly controlled. You had to swipe a staff card, punch in a code, then press the mic. There was no way for a random passenger to pick it up, which is why, when my own name crackled over the speakers at 2 a.m., I nearly dropped my headset. It was my voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," it rasped. Distorted. "Please make your way to the theater." I froze in the empty lounge, staring at the black ceiling speakers. I hadn't touched the PA, and the theater was locked at that hour. The message repeated, slower this time. "Please, make your way to the theater." I ran there anyway, adrenaline overriding sense. The double doors creaked open easily under my hand. Inside, the seats were empty, the stage dark, but the spotlight was on its shown dead center, illuminating nothing but bare carpet. I stepped closer, my shoes echoing in the vast silence. The light shifted, swinging slowly until it landed on me, and then the speakers hummed again. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next act. Static drowned the rest. I slammed the door shut and bolted, convincing myself it was a glitch. Old wiring. Maybe the system recorded snippets of my voice and replayed them. It had to be. The next day, I asked the sound tech. He shook his head. PA's clean. No recordings. Live feed only. I didn't tell him what I heard. I didn't tell anyone, but that night it happened again. This time, the voice wasn't mine. Attention all passengers, it crooned. The tone was sweet, female, almost sing-song. Please remain in your cabins. I frowned. No such announcement had been scheduled. I grabbed my radio. Bridge, was that you? No response. The speakers crackled back to life. Remain, remain, remain. The word distorted, stretching until it wasn't English anymore. Just a low drone that made the glasses in the lounge tremble on their shelves. I yanked the power from the wall unit. The drone cut off instantly. My shoulders sagged in relief, but then, from the ceiling speaker above me, unplugged and dead, a whisper trickled down. We can still hear you. And when I turned to leave, every screen on the ship flickered on at once, each one showing my own face, smiling back at me. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was stress. Ships mess with your head, no windows below deck, constant hum of machinery, recycled air. Hallucinations weren't unheard of. But then passengers started asking questions. At breakfast, a woman pulled me aside, her hands trembling around her coffee. Why did you wake us up last night? She asked. I blinked. Wake you up? The announcement, she insisted. You told everyone to stay in their cabins. My daughter cried for an hour. I forced a laugh. That wasn't me. Must have been static, but her face hardened. Don't lie to me. I know your voice. My stomach sank. That afternoon, I went straight to the communications office. The tech on duty, a guy named Harris, pulled up the logs. No PA announcements recorded between midnight and 6 a.m., he said. He turned the screen toward me. The graph showed a flat line. Silence. Then how I stopped. My voice sounded thin, even to me. He smirked. Maybe you're sleep-talking into the speakers. I left without answering. That night, I avoided the lounge. I stayed in my cabin, headphones in, music blasting. But around 2:17 a.m., the music cut. Not paused, cut. My headphones buzzed with static. Then, over the static, my name, whispered, drawn out. Come to the theater. I tore the headphones off, heart racing. The intercom in my cabin clicked alive. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's show is for one passenger only. I bolted into the hallway. It was silent, to silent. No crew, no laughter from late-night drinkers. Just the faint hum of the ship. And faintly, from every speaker above me. Applause. I followed it without meaning to, like a rat to a piper. Down the corridor, up the stairs, till I stood outside the theater again. The doors opened on their own. Inside, the spotlight was waiting. Center stage, burning white against the dark. The seats were filled now. Row after row of pale figures, faces blurred, hands clapping slowly in perfect unison. I couldn't breathe. My legs shook. Please welcome, the speakers boomed. Our next act. The spotlight snapped to me. The applause grew deafening. I backed away, but the door slammed shut behind me. My chest tightened, panic crushing my lungs. The figures rose as one, clapping faster, harder. Their faces sharpened gray, hollow-eyed, mouths stretching open, wider and wider until the clapping turned to a roar. I screamed. My voice echoed over the speakers, layered back at me with distortion. Then everything cut. The theater was empty, silent. I stood alone in the dark, chest heaving, the spotlight gone. I stumbled back to my cabin, shaking so badly I could barely fit the keycard into the lock. I swore I'd packed my things and begged the captain to let me disembark at the next port dot. But when I opened the door, my TV was already on, and on the screen, in grainy black and white, I watched myself walk onto the stage and bow, and when I hit the power button, the screen went dark, but the sound of applause kept echoing from inside my cabin walls. I didn't sleep, not after hearing that applause echo through my cabin walls. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw the blurred faces clapping, the spotlight pinning me in place. The next morning, I was a wreck. Dark circles under my eyes, hands trembling so badly I dropped 3 glasses during trivia setup. Guests noticed. One leaned across the table, whispering, "Rough night." I forced a smile. Just seasickness. But when the woman tilted her head, I swear her lips moved without sound, like she was mouthing along to something only she could hear. That night, I decided I'd had enough. I marched straight to the communications office again. Harris was there, feet up, reading a paperback. "I need to see the logs from last night," I demanded. He sighed, scrolling lazily through the screen. "Nothing. Same as always. System's clean." But I leaned over his shoulder and my stomach dropped. For a split second, I saw a spike in the graph at 2:17 a.m. before it flattened again. Harris quickly scrolled past. "Too quickly. You saw that?" I said. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Glitches happen." I slammed my hand against the desk. "You know, it's not a glitch." His eyes finally met mine. Cold. "You shouldn't listen so closely." I left, shaken. That night, I locked myself in my cabin. Headphones on, TV unplugged, lights out. I told myself I wouldn't move, no matter what. At 2:17 a.m., the intercom clicked alive. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome." I shoved my fingers in my ears, rocked back and forth, whispering, "Not real, not real." But the walls vibrated with the sound of applause, louder and louder until I could feel it rattling in my chest. My lamp flickered, casting warped shadows across the room. Then, silence. I opened my eyes. The TV was on again, though I had unplugged it. Grainy footage filled the screen. The theater, the spotlight. Me, standing center stage. I watched as my on-screen self bowed. The faceless audience erupted in clapping, but I wasn't in the theater. I was in my cabin. I lunged forward, yanking the cord from the wall, but the picture didn't vanish. It sharpened. The spotlight on the screen flared until it was blinding. My room filled with the sound of 1,000 hands clapping in perfect rhythm. And then, black. When I woke, it was morning. My TV was off. My cabin door was locked. No sign anything had happened. At breakfast, I tried to tell a fellow entertainer what I'd seen. She gave me a puzzled look. "But you did perform last night. Everyone said you killed it." My stomach dropped. I didn't." Her smile faltered. "I was there. You went on stage at 2 in the morning. I clapped for you myself." I stared at her, searching for any hint of a joke. She just sipped her coffee and looked away. I checked the log later. The system showed one unauthorized announcement at 2:17 a.m. origin, live, not recorded, not playback.live, but I still don't know if it was really me. To this day, passengers send me blurry photos of myself on that stage performances I don't remember giving, for audiences that shouldn't exist. I worked as a waiter in the main dining hall of a luxury cruise ship. You'd think the worst part of the job would be the endless smiles, the blisters from dress shoes, or the drunks who thought snapping their fingers was acceptable. But none of that comes close to what I saw at table 12. Every waiter had their assigned tables. Mine was a cluster near the starboard windows, overlooking the ocean. Guests rotated out each night, but table 12 was unusual. It was marked as a permanent assignment, always set for 1 dot at first. I didn't think much of it. Some guests preferred dining alone. I laid the silverware, polished the glass, folded the napkin, and, like clockwork, the kitchen sent out a single portion of whatever dish was featured that evening. Except there was never anyone sitting there the first night. I assumed the guest was late. I placed the plate gently on the white linen, then waited. Nobody came. After an hour, I cleared it away, untouched. The second night, same thing. The log listed the diner as Mr. William D., but there was no cabin number, no reservation details. Just a line that said, assigned, table 12. I asked my supervisor about it. She frowned. Just serve the plate, she said. Don't question it. By the third night, curiosity got the better of me. I leaned close to the Maitre D' station, scrolling through the seating chart. Table 12's guest was still listed. William D., cabin unknown. When I looked up, the seat at 12 was occupied. A man sat there, back straight, hands folded neatly on the tablecloth. His suit was dark, a little out of style, but pressed sharp. His hair slicked back. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared out the window at the rolling black sea dot. I blinked, kid, and the chair was empty again. The plate I'd set down moments before was half-eaten. My throat went dry. I told myself maybe I hadn't noticed a passenger slip in. Maybe I was overtired. But when I collected the dish, the meat was cut with surgical precision, perfect squares, lined neatly on the porcelain dot. That night, I dreamed of table 12. The seat occupied. The man turning his head slowly toward me. His face pale, his eyes sunken, his lips curling into something like a smile. I woke, drenched in sweat, the taste of salt water in my mouth. The next evening, I hesitated before setting the place. My hands shook as I placed the fork, the knife, the napkin. I lingered, waiting. At exactly 8 p.m., the overhead lights flickered. When they steadied, the wine glass at table 12 was filled. Though I hadn't poured a drop, I backed away, heart racing when I heard it. The faint scrape of silverware on china. Someone was eating, but the chair was empty. The sound of chewing filled the silence of the hall, slow, methodical, as if savoring every bite. I froze at the edge of the carpet, and then, so faint I thought I imagined it, came a whisper. Another course, please. When I checked the kitchen log later, the order for table 12 wasn't written by staff, was scrawled in a trembling hand that none of us recognized. The order slip for table 12 shouldn't have existed. Our kitchen used a digital system, no handwriting, no scribbles. Orders were printed, but there it was, tucked in the stack. Lamb shank, medium rare, written in shaky, jagged letters. No one on staff recognized it. That night, I carried the plate out with shaking hands. The dining hall buzzed with chatter, waiters weaving between tables, glasses clinking. But when I reached table 12, it was like stepping into silence. The air felt colder there. The seat was empty. I placed the dish down anyway, then retreated a step. For a few moments, nothing. Then chewing. The faint scrape of a knife. The clink of a fork against porcelain. I forced myself to glance back. The meat was shrinking, bite by bite, though no one sat in the chair. I dropped my tray. Plates shattered across the carpet. Guest stared. My supervisor swooped in, hissing through her teeth. Pick it up now. But I gestured at table 12. She cut me off. Don't say a word. Later, in the service corridor, she pulled me aside. Her face was pale. Just serve the meals. Don T. Watch. Don't listen. And whatever you do, never sit at that table. I wanted to demand answers. Her eyes told me she wouldn't give any. The next night, I tried avoiding table 12, hoping someone else would take it. But when I delivered plates to 14, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. The wine glass at 12 filled itself, dark red liquid spilling to the brim. I froze. Then the whisper came again. directly in my ear, though no one was near. Another course. I stumbled back, nearly colliding with the guest. My hands trembled so badly I had to excuse myself. By the time I returned, the plate was clean. Knife and fork crossed neatly, as if waiting for me. From then on, it escalated. The orders grew stranger. Raw fish, blood pudding, dishes we didn't serve. The slips appeared anyway, tucked in among the printed tickets, always written in that same trembling hand. One night, brought out with the kitchen cobbled together a slab of undercooked beef, red and dripping. I set it down, gagging at the smell. The air grew heavy around me when I turned to leave. The whisper came again, louder. Sit. The chair scraped back, inviting. My knees buckled. For a moment, I swear something unseen pressed against my shoulders, urging me down. I staggered away, heart hammering, muttering prayers under my breath. That night, I dreamed of the man again. Dark suit, slick hair, pale face. This time, he was sitting at table 12, tapping the knife against his plate, waiting. When I woke, my pillow was damp with seawater. The next evening, I begged my supervisor to reassign me. Please, anyone else can serve it. She stared at me for a long time. Then, softly, do you think you were the first? Her words chilled me to the bone. I served the table again that night. The hall bustled around me, laughter and chatter, but at 12, silence reigned. The plate was waiting. This time, when I leaned down, I caught a reflection in the wine glass, not mine. A pale man stared back, lips curling into a grin, and the whisper came again, with hunger dripping from every syllable. Tomorrow, you sit. When I checked the seating chart later, my own name was listed for table 12, replacing William D. When I saw my name on the seating chart, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't typed like the other guests. It was handwritten, jagged, the same trembling script that had appeared on every strange order slip. Table 12, guest, William D. I ran to my supervisor, demanding answers. She didn't even look surprised, just weary. You should have left when you had the chance, she whispered. That night, I tried to refuse. I told myself I wouldn't go to the dining hall, wouldn't even step near that cursed table. But at 8 p.m., my legs carried me there anyway, like strings pulling a marionette. The hall bustled as usual, families laughing, glasses clinking. But table 12 stood in its pocket of silence, perfectly set. A single plate waited, steaming with roast duck. Though I hadn't carried it out, the chair scraped back on its own. I fought to resist, but something pressed down on my shoulders, invisible and heavy, forcing me forward. I collapsed into the chair, my hands trembling as the fork lifted. Not by me, by something else. The fork full of meat hovered, then shoved into my mouth. I gagged, but my jaw moved against my will, chewing slowly. The flavor was wrong, metallic, thick. The whispers surrounded me. Eat. The guests around us didn't notice a thing. They kept laughing, drinking, clinking glasses. But at my table, I was dining with something no one else could see. Across from me, the seat filled. The man was back. Dark suit, slick hair, skin pale and damp like it had been dredged from the sea. He smiled, raising his glass in a mock toast. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. He leaned forward, his voice wet and gurgling. You're my course. I thrashed in my seat, but my arms and legs moved like they belonged to someone else. The knife in my hand pressed against my skin, slicing a neat strip from the back of my wrist. Blood welled up. The fork lifted it toward my mouth. I screamed inside, but my jaw opened. The metallic taste coated my tongue. My stomach churned, bile rising. The man across from me clapped slowly, his grin splitting wider. The dining hall never noticed. Not a single person turned their head. I don't know how long it went on. Bite after bite, cut after cut, the whispers drumming in rhythm. Eat, eat, eat. At some point, I must have blacked out. When I woke, I was in my cabin. My uniform was soaked, sleeves stiff with dried blood. My reflection in the mirror stared back with hollow eyes, lips stained dark red. On my bedside table sat a folded note, not typed, handwritten, the jagged scrawl I'd come to dread. Dinner for one. Tomorrow again. I wanted to scream, to run, to fling myself overboard. But when I opened the door, I smelled Etros duck wafting up from the hall. My stomach growled, and deep inside, I knew the truth. I wasn't a waiter anymore. I wasn't even a guest. I was the next permanent diner. Table 12 never stays empty, and now it has me. Security on a cruise ship isn't glamorous. It's not chasing spies or solving murders like people think. It's drunk tourists, lost wallets, and the occasional fight near the pool bar. We walk the decks at night to keep things quiet. That's how I ended up on Deck 13, technically. Deck 13 wasn't supposed to exist. Most ships skip the number altogether. Bad luck, superstition. But on our liner, the stairwell between 12 and 14 had an unmarked landing. A narrow hallway, a locked door. Crew called it the ghosted deck. One stormy night, I was making rounds when my radio cut out. Static hissed loud enough to sting. I tapped it, swore under my breath. I realized the stairwell door ahead was open. It led to Deck 13. I'd passed that landing 100 times, always sealed. But now, beyond the threshold, I saw a corridor stretching into darkness. Rain lashed against the portholes, though we were sailing calm waters an hour earlier. I hesitated, telling myself it was just a maintenance hall. But when I stepped through, the air changed. Damp, freezing. My boots squelched on carpet, soaked through. The storm outside didn't match the ship's motion. We weren't rocking like we should have been. It was like the weather existed only on this deck. I moved cautiously, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The walls dripped with condensation. Doors lined the hall, all unmarked, each one rattling faintly as if something inside was pounding to get out. Lightning flashed outside the portholes, illuminating the corridor in a sickly white. For a second, I saw figures pressed against the glass faces, twisted in terror, mouths open in silent screams. When the light faded, the glass was empty again. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing wrong, swallowed by the storm. One door creaked open behind me. Slowly, deliberately, I spun, shining my flashlight. The room inside looked normal. Clean bed, folded towels, fresh carpet. But water streamed steadily down the walls, pooling on the floor. A shape sat on the bed. A man. He was drenched, clothes clinging to his skin, head bowed. His chest heaved like he'd just been pulled from the ocean. "Sir?" I asked, stepping closer. His head snapped up. His eyes were pale, cloudy. His lips peeled back, water gushing from his mouth as he rasped. "It's not your storm." The lights above us flickered, then went out. When they came back, the bed was empty. The carpet was dry. I stumbled back into the hallway, heart hammering. The storm outside howled louder, rattling the portholes, and the floor pitched under my feet even though the rest of the ship should have been calm. I bolted for the stairwell, but when I reached it, the door slammed shut in my face. Locked out behind me, the corridor groaned. The walls swelled like lungs inhaling. I realized then Deck 13 wasn't abandoned. It was alive. And when the storm thundered again, I swore the sound came from inside the ship, not outside. The storm inside the ship grew louder. Thunder cracked down the corridor, rattling my bones. Rain spattered against my face, though there was no sky above me, only steel bulkhead. I hammered on the stairwell door, shouting into my dead radio. Nothing. The handle burned with cold. I backed away, flashlight trembling in my grip. The corridor stretched longer now. I swear it hadn't been this long before. Door after door rattled violently, hinges groaning like they were about to burst. Behind each one, I heard things, footsteps, pacing, voices, chanting, fists pounding against the wood. One door slammed open on its own. A woman staggered out, coughing, dripping seawater. She collapsed against me, her hair plastered to her face. "Help," she croaked. "They won't let us leave." I tried to steady her, but my hands passed straight through her arm. She dissolved like mist, leaving my skin wet with brine. The lights above flickered again. This time, the corridor was packed. Dozens of soaked figures stood shoulder to shoulder, lining the walls. Their eyes were pale, lips blue, water spilling steadily from their mouths like broken faucets. I stumbled backward, wrenching my flashlight beam across them. Their heads turned in perfect unison, tracking me. A man at the front rasped, "Deck 13, sails alone." My throat closed. "What do you want from me?" They answered together, voices layered into a single roar. "Stay." The porthole glass behind them exploded inward with a deafening crash. Black water gushed through, flooding the corridor. The wave hit me like a truck, slamming me against the opposite wall. Salt burned my throat as I choked, flailing to stay upright. But the figures didn't move. They stood calmly as the flood swirled around their ankles, their eyes never leaving me. I clawed my way back toward the stairwell, fighting the current. My boots slipped on the soaked carpet. Another wave surged, dragging me down the hall. My flashlight spun out of my hand, swallowed by the black water. The next flash of lightning revealed something worse. The corridor didn't end. It bent, stretching endlessly into the storm. More doors rattled open, more drowned figures spilling out, their whispers mixing with the roar. One reached me, fingers icy as they clamped around my wrist. His skin sloughed off under my grip, slick and rotten. I tore free, gagging. Ahead, through the sheets of water, I spotted another stairwell door, identical to the one I'd come from. Its exit sign glowed faint red through the downpour. I forced my legs to move, each step dragging like lead. Behind me, the voices rose, chanting over the thunder. "Stay, stay, stay." I reached the door and slammed my shoulder into it. It didn't budge. Another wave crashed, slamming me against a frame. My lungs screamed. Then I heard it, my radio, crackling weakly against my soaked chest. A voice broke through, faint but urgent. "Report. Deck 12, secure. Deck 14, secure. Snowstorm." "Where the hell are you?" I clawed for the mic with numb fingers. "Deck 13, I gasped. Static, then silence. The drowned figures surged closer, filling the corridor wall to wall. Their faces blurred into one another. A single pale mass rising with the storm. I slammed the door again, screaming, praying. The lock groaned, and then, with a crack like thunder itself, the door gave way, swinging open into darkness. I staggered through, choking, blinded. When I looked back, the storm was gone. The corridor behind me was dry, clean, silent. But the number stenciled on the wall where I stood wasn't 12 or 14. It was still 13. I stood trenched in the stairwell, heart pounding. The corridor behind me was spotless, no water, no storm, no figures, just a clean, empty passage. But the stenciled number on the bulkhead still read 13. I shouldn't have been there. I forced myself up the stairs, boots squelching, lungs burning with salt water. When I pushed through the next door, I stumbled into Deck 12. Bright lights, music piping through the speakers, passengers strolling casually with drinks in hand, oblivious to the storm raging just one deck above. I collapsed against the wall, gasping. A guest frowned at me. "You okay, officer?" I managed a weak nod, hiding my soaked uniform. I wanted to scream at them, to drag them to the stairwell and make them see what I'd seen. But when I looked back, the door was gone. Just smooth wall. That should have been the end. I tried to convince myself it was stress, exhaustion, some hallucination brought on by endless shifts. But that night, while reviewing security footage. I froze. Cameras had picked up a figure walking the Deck 13 corridor. Tall, broad-shouldered, soaked to the bone. His face pale, his eyes hollow. He looked like me. The timestamp read exactly the same moment I was gasping for air on Deck 12. I shut the screen off, trembling. For the next few days, I avoided the stairwell. But little things reminded me. Wet footprints in empty corridors. Radios crackling with faint thunder when the skies were clear. Guests reporting weird drafts from unmarked doors. Then, one night, I was called to a disturbance. A passenger had gone missing. Last seen near the stairwell between decks 12 and 14. I got there first. The landing door stood open again. Rain lashed against the frame. My radio screamed with static. I wanted to run. Every muscle told me to. But then I thought of the missing passenger and of the faces I'd seen pressed against the portholes. How many others had disappeared down here? So I stepped through. The storm swallowed me instantly. Wind howled. Waves crashed against invisible glass. The corridor stretched into infinity. Doors flew open, one after another, releasing more drowned figures who staggered into the flood. They reached for me, whispering in that layered chorus, "Stay, stay, stay." I fought to push back toward the stairwell, but the water dragged me deeper inside. I glimpsed the missing passenger, wide mouth open in a scream as the figures pulled him under. His body dissolved into brine dot. Lightning split the corridor, and for one blinding moment, I saw myself standing among them, pale, soaked, lips stretched into a grin. I didn't recognize. The thunder drowned out my scream. I must have blacked out, because when I came to, I was back on deck 12, dry, whole, passengers strolling past as though nothing had happened. But the next night, another passenger vanished, and another. Now I know the truth. Deck 13 doesn't just take people. It trades them. One day soon, it'll be my turn to stay. And when the storm comes again, I'll be one of the drowned faces lining that corridor, waiting for the next fool to open the door. Because on every voyage, Deck 13 opens again and someone always takes my place. I wasn't supposed to be exploring the crew decks. But that's the thing about cruise ships after a few days, the shuffle between buffies and sun lounges gets old. I wanted to see the parts no one talked about. That's how I found the elevator. It was tucked behind a service corridor. Past a door marked staff only, the hallway smelled of bleach and damp steel. At the very end was a lone elevator, older than the other SIDS panel, yellowed, its floor indicator cracked. I should have left it alone. But curiosity is stronger than common sense. I pressed the button. The doors groaned open. Inside, the floor was scuffed, the fluorescent bulb flickering. Unlike the guest elevators, the panel had no labeled floors, just numbered buttons, 1 through 14, and one more. Unmarked, my stomach flipped. I hesitated, then pressed 1. The elevator shuddered and descended smoothly, opening onto a crew corridor, exactly as expected. I laughed nervously, told myself it was harmless, then hit 14. It rose, opened onto the pool deck. Normal. Finally, I pressed the unmarked button. The doors closed. The car dropped not smoothly, but violently, like the cable snapped. I slammed against the railing, ears popping. My stomach lurched into my throat. Then it stopped. The doors creaked open onto a corridor I didn't recognize. The walls were damp, streaked with rust. The carpet squished under my shoes, soaked through. Dim lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly green glow. The air was heavy with salt and mold, and it smelled old, too old. I stepped out, heart hammering. The hallway stretched long and silent. Doors lined the walls, unnumbered, each one warped as though swollen with water damage. Something dripped steadily from the ceiling, splattering into puddles. The sound echoed too loudly, like we weren't on a ship at all. I turned back toward the elevator. The doors had shut. I pressed the button again, jabbing it with frantic fingers. No response. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, heavy, squishing through the wet carpet. Somewhere deeper down the hall. They dragged, uneven, like the gait of someone who'd been walking far too long. I froze, every nerve in my body screaming to move. The steps grew louder, closer, till I swore they were just around the corner. I bolted back into the elevator, hammering every button at once. The light above flickered, gears groaning, then finally lurched upward. The doors sealed shut just as the footsteps reached the threshold. I didn't breathe until the car jolted open on Deck 5. Bright lights, laughter, music from the lounge. Normal. I stumbled out, gasping, trying to convince myself it was some unused maintenance level. A storage hall, maybe. Nothing more. But that night, when I passed the same service corridor again, the elevator was waiting. Doors open, light on dot, and inside, the unmarked button was glowing faint green. And though I never pressed it again, I woke in the middle of the night to hear the elevator running on its own descending. The next day, I tried to ignore it, told myself it was a trick of the mind, that the glowing button was just a faulty bulb. But curiosity itched at me. I kept glancing toward that service corridor, waiting for another glimpse of the elevator. By midnight, I couldn't resist. I slipped past the staff-only door, heart hammering. The corridor stretched silent, bleach, and damp steel thick in the air. At the end, the elevator waited. Doors open, light buzzing faintly overhead. The unmarked button still glowed. I told myself I wouldn't press it. I just wanted to look, prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. But when I stepped inside, the doors sealed shut on their own. The elevator dropped, violently. My stomach lurched, ears popping. I clawed at the panel, slamming random buttons, but nothing responded. The car plunged deeper and deeper. Finally, with a screech of metal, stopped. The doors creaked open, same corridor as before. Rust-streaked walls, soaked carpet, mold in the air. But this time, it felt different, heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I told myself I wouldn't step out. But then I heard it, voices, low, murmuring, like dozens of people whispering in unison. They rose and fell with a rhythm, almost like chanting. I leaned forward, peering down the hall. The lights flickered. In the glow, I saw movement shapes dragging themselves across the floor, crawling, slow, wet motions. I stumbled back, slamming the closed door button. The doors crept shut, agonizingly slow. A pale hand shot through the gap. I screamed, hammering the button harder. The doors hesitated, then shuddered closed, severing the hand at the wrist. It dissolved into brine on the elevator floor, leaving only the stink of rot. The car jerked upward. I collapsed against the wall, shaking. My pulse thundered in my ears. When the doors opened, I was back on Deck 5. Laughter, music, bright lights, like nothing had happened. But the brine stain on the floor was still there. The next morning, I swore I'd report it, march to the captain, demand answers. But when I asked a crew member about the service corridor, he frowned. What corridor? I dragged him to the spot. The staff-only door was gone. Just smooth-walled, my stomach dropped. I started avoiding elevators altogether, taking the stairs everywhere. But late one night, lying in my cabin, I heard it again. The faint whir of cables, the metallic groan of an elevator running down. I bolted upright. The sound wasn't coming from the hall. It was coming from inside my walls. The next day, the ship docked at port. I nearly disembarked, ready to abandon the whole trip. But when I reached the gangway, the elevator chime echoed behind me. That same old, broken-sounding chime. I turned. Far down the hall, beyond the flow of passengers, the elevator door slid open. Inside, the unmarked button glowed, and on the floor, wet footprints lead out, stopping halfway across the hall. like someone had stepped into the crowd and vanished. That night, I dreamed of the elevator, but when I woke, my cabin key was gone, placed by a rusted button in my pocket. When I woke with that rusted button in my pocket, I knew I was done pretending. It wasn't a dream. The elevator wanted me. I tried to throw it away. I hurled the button into the ocean from the promenade deck, watched it vanish into the waves. My heart pounded with relief, but when I got back to my cabin, it was sitting on the pillow, damp, rust streaks staining the sheets. That night, the sound of the elevator was louder than ever. Cables whining, gears grinding, the car descending endlessly inside the walls. I pressed my hands against the plaster, and it vibrated like a heartbeat. At 2 a.m., my cabin door unlocked with a soft click. I hadn't touched it. The lights flickered, and down the hall, I heard the chime. I don't know why I followed. Maybe I didn't have a choice. My legs carried me past sleeping passengers, down into the silent service corridor. The staff-only door was back. The elevator waited. Doors open. The unmarked button glowed brighter than ever. I stepped inside. The doors sealed shut. This time, the car didn't lurch, slid smoothly, endlessly downward. My reflection in the scratched steel walls warped, twisting into pale shapes that weren't mine. My breath fogged in the air, though the cabin was stiflingly hot. The doors opened. The same corridor stretched before me, but now it was crowded. Figures lined the walls, hundreds of them, their faces slack, their eyes milky, their lips dripping with seawater. They didn't move. They just stared. I backed against the railing, chest heaving. "I don't belong here," I whispered. The figures tilted their heads in unison. Then, as one, they whispered back, "You do now?" The elevator doors slammed shut, trapping me inside. The car dropped again, deeper this time. My ears popped until blood trickled from them. My stomach lurched as if I was falling through the earth itself. I hammered the panel, jabbing every button, but only the unmarked one responded. It pulsed faint green, brighter with every passing second. When the car finally stopped, the doors creaked open into blackness. Not a corridor, not a deck, just water. Endless black water. The stink of rot and salt hit me in the face. Something moved in the depths, pale shapes rising, reaching. I screamed, but the elevator shuddered forward, tilting, spilling me out into the flood. The water closed over my head, ice cold, crushing. Hands grabbed me, pulling, dragging me down. My lungs burned, my vision swam. Faces swirled around me, passengers, crew, strangers all with milky eyes and slack jaws. Their mouths opened and bubbles poured out in a single word. "Stay." I fought, thrashed, clawed upward, but the elevator was gone. No doors, no escape, just darkness and water forever. The last thing I remember was my chest exploding with pain as the sea poured in. My vision narrowed to a pinprick of pale light, and then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the elevator, standing upright, dry, uniform, crisp. The panel blinked. The doors slid open. The corridor was empty again. I stumbled forward, gasping with relief. But when I looked back, my reflection in the elevator still wasn't mine anymore. It was pale, milky-eyed lips, dripping brine, and when the doors closed, I understood the truth. I hadn't escaped. I was the elevator now, and every night since, I hear the cables groan and the chime echo carrying another passenger down to me. My job on the ship was simple. Monitor the radio room, handle transmissions, relay messages, keep an ear out for distress calls. 90% of the time, it was static, weather reports, and drunk passengers trying to radio their friends. I'll never forget the night I heard the captain's voice. It was late, just past 3 a.m. The ship was quiet, most passengers asleep. I was half dozing at the console when the radio crackled alive with a familiar voice. Calm, commanding. "This is Captain Alden of the Aurora Dawn." My spine stiffened. That was our ship, and that was our captain. But he wasn't supposed to be on the radio. Not at this hour. Not at all. He had officers for that. The transmission continued, steady and clear. If you are hearing this, remain calm. Stay in your cabins. Do not attempt to leave the ship. I frowned, grabbing the handset. Bridge, this is comes. Did you authorize a broadcast? Silence. The captain's voice went on. It is too late to turn back. The ship has already crossed. Static swallowed the rest. My skin crawled. Crossed. Crossed what? We were in calm waters, halfway between ports. Nothing unusual. I called the bridge again. This time, an officer answered. Groggy. What's the problem? Was the captain on the radio just now? A pause. Then, he's asleep in his quarters. Do not disturb him. I sat there in the humming silence of the radio room, heart pounding. I knew what I'd heard. The next night, the same thing happened. This is Captain Alden of the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, it is already inside. Do not look for it. The transmission cut abruptly. I bolted to the bridge, adrenaline surging. He's broadcasting again. But when I arrived, the captain was there in person, sipping coffee, chatting with officers. Alive.com. Very much not at a radio console. He looked at me like I'd grown 2 heads. I haven't touched a radio in years, he said. His tone was flat, dismissive, but his eyes were tired. Too tired. That night, I recorded the broadcast. At 3:12 a.m. exactly. The radio crackled again with his voice. This is Captain Alden. If you are hearing this, you are already dead. Static swallowed everything else. My blood froze. I replayed the tape 3 times. It was unmistakable. The captain's voice.com. Steady. The next morning, I confronted him with the recording. He listened in silence, face unreadable. Then he leaned close and whispered, "Destroy that tape. Do not listen again." He turned and walked away before I could ask a single question. That night, the radio came alive again. This is Captain Alden of the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, it's too late for me, and when I checked the bridge logs later, found something chilling. The transmissions were being logged from inside the captain's quarters. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The logs showed the broadcasts were originating from the captain's quarters, even while he was sleeping or eating in plain sight. It didn't make sense. The next night, I prepared. I kept the recorder running, headphones on, ready for anything. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the radio crackled alive. This is Captain Alden of the Aurora Dawn. I stiffened. His voice was calm, familiar, but there was something off, an echo under it. It's like 2 voices layered, slightly out of sync. If you are hearing this, it is already walking the decks. Do not follow the footsteps. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the mic, trembling. Identify yourself. This is comes Officer Bennett. Who the hell is on this frequency? Static hissed. Then the captain's voice replied, but not to me. Bennett, stop listening. I tore the headphones off, heart hammering. He knew my name. He knew I was there. The next day, I cornered the captain again. I played the tape back. His face tightened, but he stayed calm. Where were you at 3:12 last night? I demanded. He looked me dead in the eye. Asleep. In my cabin. Don't push this further. Then he leaned closer, so quiet only I could hear. Some voices aren't meant to be heard twice. I barely slept. My dreams were full of static, voices, whispering, corridors that stretched into endless black dot. By the 4th night, I was shaking before midnight. The recorder hummed, waiting. The clock ticked closer. 3:12 a.m. The radio came alive. This is Captain Alden of the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, open no doors. Trust no reflections. The echo in his voice was stronger now, distorted, like something else was speaking with him in perfect sync. I whispered into the mic, unable to stop myself. Why are you doing this? What are you? The reply came instantly. Tom. Terrifying. This is Captain Alden. If you are hearing this, you already know. The static hissed louder, filling the room. My recorder light blinked rapidly, the tape spooling as if trying to capture more than sound. Then the radio screamed high-pitched feedback that made me rip the headphones off. The speakers shook. For a split second, over the distortion, I heard something that wasn't his voice at all. A chorus. Dozens of voices layered together, shrieking, whispering, laughing when it cut out. The silence was worse. The next morning, I checked the bridge logs again. The transmissions weren't just coming from the captain's quarters anymore. They were coming from everywhere. Cabin speakers, crew radios, even the intercom system. And every log listed the same origin ID, Alden, that afternoon. I tried confronting him one last time, but when I reached his quarters, the door was locked. I pounded until an officer stopped me. The captain's indisposed, he said firmly, but I heard him last night. I snapped. The officer frowned. Captain Alden died 2 weeks ago. Heart attack in his sleep. My stomach dropped. I laughed, shaking my head, thinking he was joking. But his face stayed grave. You must be mistaken, he said softly. You didn't hear anything, but I knew what I'd heard. And that night, the radio proved it again, at 3:12 a.m. The captain's voice filled the room, calm, commanding. This is Captain Alden of the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, it's already behind you. And when I spun around, the only thing in the dark radio room was my own recorder still running, still capturing a voice that wasn't mine. I sat frozen in the radio room, staring at the recorder as it spun. The captain's voice echoed through the speakers, calm and steady. This is Captain Alden of the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, you are already gone. I shut the machine off, heart pounding. The silence pressed in. My skin crawled with the feeling of being watched. By morning, I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. I confronted the first officer, demanding the truth. He said the captain died 2 weeks ago. Then, who's been giving orders? Who's been walking the bridge? He looked at me with weary eyes. Sometimes the sea doesn't let go. Sometimes the ship keeps its captain longer than it should. I laughed, sharp and broken. That's insane. But deep down, I already knew. That night, I returned to the radio room one last time. The recorder was waiting. My hands shook as I pressed record. 3:12 a.m., the broadcast began. This is Captain Alden of the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, do not leave your post. Do not abandon ship. The voice was clear. Too clear. It filled not just the radio, but the walls themselves, vibrating through the steel dot. Then, without warning, the feed split. 2 voices layered together. One was the captain. The other was mine. This is Bennett of the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, stay where you are. Do not look behind you. My throat closed. I hadn't spoken. My lips hadn't moved. But the radio insisted I had. The recorder light blinked faster, tape spooling violently. Static bled into the room, warping the air, thickening it like a fog. I tore the headphones off, but the voice continued, echoing without speakers now. All around me, inside me. This is Captain Alden. This is Bennett. This is the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, you've always been here. The room spun. My vision blurred. I staggered out into the hallway, gasping. Crew members passed by, but none looked at me. None even blinked. Their faces were pale, eyes blank, like static had filled them too. I ran to the bridge, desperate. The doors opened on their own. Inside, the captain stood at the helm, back straight, hands clasped behind him. His uniform was pristine. He turned slowly. His eyes were hollow, his smile wrong. "Officer Bennett," he said, his voice echoing in perfect sync with the broadcasts. "Good to hear you." I stumbled back, shaking. "You're dead." He tilted his head. Then so are you. The bridge dissolved into static, the crew around me flickering like old film reels. I clutched my chest, breath ragged. The ship itself seemed to hum with the broadcast. The last thing I heard before blacking out was my own voice, calm and steady, carried over every speaker on the ship. This is Bennett of the Aurora Dawn. If you are hearing this, it's already too late. When I woke, the radio room was silent. The recorder sat on the desk, tape spooled to the end. I pressed play. The broadcast began. My voice, my name, the captain's. Now, every night at 3:12, passengers hear me on the intercom warning them to stay calm, if I've always been the captain. Being a deckhand on a cruise ship is lonely work. Nights are the worst. You're out there with nothing but the hum of engines and the endless black of the sea. You start hearing waves that sound like whispers, calls that aren't really there. But what I saw wasn't just loneliness. It started on a calm night, halfway across the Atlantic. I was on watch, leaning against the railing, when I noticed lights on the horizon. Not starship lights. A liner, big as ours, keeping perfect pace alongside us. At first, thought it was just another cruise ship on the same route. Happens sometimes. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. The ship had no running lights, no flag, no markings. Just rows of dim cabin windows, glowing faintly like lanterns underwater. I grabbed the binoculars. The closer I looked, the worse it got. The cabins were filled with people, but they weren't moving. They stood, pressed against the glass, shoulder to shoulder, staring outward, staring at me. I blinked hard, lowered the binoculars. When I looked again, the windows were dark, empty. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was overtired. But when I checked the radar, the screen was blank. No ship, no trace. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? The next night, it was back. Same place, same distance, pacing us across the waves. This time, I wasn't alone. Marco, another deckhand, was on shift. I nudged him. See that? He squinted. See what? The light, I said. Starboard side. He frowned at me like I was crazy. It's empty out there, but I could see it, clear as day. The liner gliding silently alongside us, cabin lights glowing. I brought the binoculars to my eyes again. My stomach dropped. The figures were there, pressed against the glass, their pale faces fixed in my direction. Only now, some of them had their hands raised, palms pressed flat against the windows. It's like they were reaching. I lowered the binoculars fast. The ship was gone again. Marco clapped me on the shoulder. Get some rest, man. You're seeing things. But I knew I wasn't. The third night, the ship appeared closer. I didn't need binoculars. I could see the pale faces clearly now, lit from below by the sick glow of the cabins. None of them moved. None blinked. And then, for the first time, the radio crackled alive. A voice whispered through the static. Don't look at them. I spun, heart hammering. Bridge, did you hear that? No reply. Just silence. When I turned back, the ship was gone, but wet footprints now marked the deck beside me, leading away into the dark. And when I followed the prints, they ended at the railing dripping fresh seawater over the side, as if someone had just climbed aboard. The footprints on deck were real. I knelt down, touched them still wet, salt stinging my fingers. They led straight to the railing, then stopped. Nothing in the water below, but black waves stretching forever. I didn't sleep that night. The next evening, I begged Marco to stay with me during watch. He grumbled, but eventually agreed. I pointed starboard, waiting for the phantom ship to appear. Midnight came. 1A.M. 2. Nothing. Marco clapped my shoulder. See, just nerves. I almost believed him until the horn sounded low, long. A ship's horn rolling across the sea. To close, we both whipped our heads to starboard. And there it was. The other liner loomed in the dark, closer than ever. Its cabin lights glowed pale yellow, casting sickly halos across the waves. I could see the faces pressed against the windows, hundreds of them, unmoving, all staring in our direction. Marco swore under his breath. Jesus Christ. Where did that come from? Radar, I hissed, sprinting to the console. My heart plummeted. The screen was empty. Blank ocean, but outside, the ship drew closer. Close enough I could see condensation streaming down its windows. Close enough I could hear faint knocking through the night air, not random knocks, rhythmic, like fists pounding in. It's unison, boom, boom, boom. The sound vibrated through my chest. Marco stumbled backward, pale. We should wake the captain. I grabbed the radio. Static screamed back at me, louder and louder until it was unbearable. Then, underneath the noise, a whisper threaded through. You're already boarded. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the receiver. When I looked back at the phantom ship, the figures in the windows had changed. They weren't staring anymore. They were smiling, wide, too wide, and then the lights blinked out. The sea was empty again. Marco and I barely spoke. He muttered curses under his breath, eyes wide. We filed our report in silence. Unexplained noise, possible false radar reading. No one questioned it, but that night, in my cabin, I woke to dripping. A puddle spread across the carpet near the door. Salt water. I followed it with trembling steps. The trail led to my bunk, and when I pulled the sheets back, my skin went cold. There were wet handprints pressed into the mattress. The next evening, I refused to go on deck. I traded shifts, lied about being sick. Marco went alone. When he returned, he wouldn't speak. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin clammy. Finally, he whispered. They called my name. My stomach turned. Over the radio, he shook his head. From the water, we decided to check the logs again. The navigation console showed something new. For 2 hours the night before, a second vessel had been recorded on our exact course running parallel. Its name flickered faint on the screen. Aurora Dawn. The problem was, that was the name of our ship. Marco slammed the console shut, his hands shaking. I'm done. I don't care what's out there. He stormed off, muttering about quitting at the next port. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple, because when I glanced back at the monitor, the phantom ship was still there, closer, almost overlapping us, and the log didn't say Aurora Dawn anymore. It said Aurora Dawn 2. In the moment I blinked, I realized with horror that the log now listed me not as crew but as a passenger on the second ship. I couldn't stop staring at the log. Aurora Dawn 2. Same tonnage, same length, same number of decks, but the crew roster was wrong. It didn't show our names. She showed us as passengers, and there, under deckhands, my name glowed, but not in the crew list. In the deceased column, I slammed the console shut, bile rising in my throat. No, it was a glitch. Had to be. That night, Marco didn't show up for shift. I searched the crew deck, the mess hall, even his cabin. Empty. His bunk was damp. Sheets soaked through with salt water. When I asked around, no one remembered him. Not the captain. Not the other deckhands. It was like he'd never been there at all. But I remembered. I went topside, desperate for air. The sea stretched out black and endless. And there it was, the phantom ship, closer than ever, gliding silently alongside us. I didn't need binoculars anymore. I could see their faces pressed against the glass. Dozens, hundreds, all pale, all grinning. And among them, one face I knew, Marco Dot, his eyes locked on mine. His lips moved. Come over. The air turned freezing. My breath fogged in front of me. The radio on my belt crackled alive, whispering in 100 voices at once. You're already on board. The railing beneath my hands was slick. Wet footprints trailed across the deck again, leading to the starboard side. I staggered back, heart pounding. Then the horn sounded low, long, answered by another. 2 ships, side by side. But when I looked back at my own vessel, the Aurora Dawn, I froze. From the outside, it wasn't the same ship I knew. Its windows were dark, its hull streaked with rust. And through the glass, I saw faces staring back, pale, smiling, pressed to the glass, just like the phantom ship. 2 ships, both ours, both wrong. I grabbed the radio, screaming into it. Bridge, do you see this? Static. Then, faintly, my own voice answered. This is the Aurora Dawn. Stay calm. Remain in your cabin. I dropped the handset, shaking. That wasn't a transmission. That was me. The phantom ship edged closer. I swear I could hear wood groaning, steel grinding, as if the 2 hulls were about to scrape together. My reflection shimmered in the dark water below. Only it wasn't mine. It was pale, slack-jawed, grinning. The deck pitched. I stumbled, nearly toppling over the rail. For a heartbeat, I swear I felt hands grab mine, cold, clammy, pulling. I tore free, collapsing against the deck. When I looked up, the phantom ship was gone, but the log still showed it. Aurora Dawn 2, still pacing us, still full of passengers, and I'm still listed. Not as crew, not alive. I don't know how much longer I can fight it. Every night, I hear the horn. Every night, the ship returns. Sometimes, it's alongside us. Sometimes, when I blink too long, I see it below us, shadowing our hull like a reflection in black water. I know what it wants. It wants me to remember that I've already boarded. And when the horn sounds again tonight, I know the second ship won't just follow us, it'll take me back where I already belong.